This presentation is on dependent clauses. Words, phrases, or clauses. So back when we learned conjunctions, we said that conjunctions are words that connect two or more words, phrases, or clauses. Well, we know what words are. We know that words are nouns, verbs, pronouns, adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, or interjections. Every single word in the English language is one of these 8 parts of speech. We also know what phrases are. Phrases are a group of words that act together to act like one of the parts of speech. What the phrases we know are prepositional phrases and verb phrases. We know that prepositional phrases is a group of words that act together. Sometimes they act like an adjective, sometimes they act like an adverb. We also know verb phrases, and that's a group of words, and those words together act like the verb in a sentence. Phrases do not have both a subject and a verb, okay? They act as one single part of speech, but they do not have both a subject and a verb like a sentence. So we've reviewed what words are, we know that. We've reviewed what phrases are. That brings us to clauses. In this lesson, we're going to learn more about clauses. Back when we learned about conjunctions, we diagrammed compound sentences. And in those compound sentences, we had 2 independent clauses. So a clause is a group of words that contains both a subject and a verb. So look at these 2 examples. The baby cried. Whenever the baby cried, these are both clauses. They both have a subject, and that's baby, and they both have a verb, cried. But can you hear a difference between the 2 examples? When I read them, the baby cried. Whenever the baby cried. The first one makes sense by itself and can stand alone as a sentence because it's a complete thought. The second one cannot stand alone as a sentence because it doesn't have a complete thought by itself. When you read whenever the baby cried, you expect something else because what do you mean whenever the baby cried? What happened whenever the baby cried? Whenever the baby cried, I would pick him up. Whenever the baby cried, I would feed him. What would happen whenever the baby cried? It's not a complete thought by itself. So the names for these 2 types of clauses are independent and dependent. If it can stand alone, like the first one, it's an independent clause. If it cannot stand alone, like the second one, it is a dependent clause. But both clauses have both a subject and a verb. One can just stand alone, independent. One cannot stand alone, dependent. So we're going to start with independent clauses. An independent clause is also called a main clause, and it's a group of words with a subject and a verb, because that's what clauses are, and independent clauses express a complete thought. They can always stand alone as a complete sentence on their own, and this is key. In order to have a sentence, you must have at least 1 independent clause. Okay, you can have 2 independent clauses and then you have a compound sentence, which you know about. Okay, but in order to be a sentence, you must have at least 1 independent clause. I like to think of independent clauses when I compare it to like a military family. You have a sponsor and then you have dependents, right? The independent clause is like the sponsor. The independent clause can be on its own. Now we're going to talk about the dependent clause. We have not diagrammed any dependent clauses yet, so this is brand new material. A dependent clause is also called a subordinate clause, and it's a group of words with a subject and a verb, because that's what clauses are, a group of words with subject and verb included, but it does not express a complete thought. So because it doesn't express a complete thought, it cannot stand alone. It needs to be attached to an independent clause in order to make sense. And these are what I like to think of as the military dependents. We, as dependents, spouses, and children, need to have our sponsor to be here in Okinawa. We can't be alone. We can't stand alone here in Okinawa. Our sponsors can be here all alone, right? They don't need us, but we need them. We are dependents. All right, let's look at independent clauses and dependent clauses. Here are 3 independent clauses. Mark ate dinner at 6 o'clock. The cat meowed. I swam at the health club. These can stand alone as complete ideas. Here are some dependent clauses. Because Mark ate dinner at 6 o'clock, whenever the cat meowed, since I swam at the health club, you can see that these still have a subject and a verb, but they can no longer stand alone because they're not a complete idea. So Here's what happens with dependent clauses and independent clauses. Because Mark ate dinner at 6 o'clock, we've already said that's a dependent clause. Because Mark ate dinner at 6 o'clock, he was late for the movie. If you attach that dependent clause with an independent clause, he was late for the movie, then you have a complete sentence because the sentence must have at least one independent clause. Whenever the cat meowed, that's dependent. Whenever the cat meowed, we let him outside. See, that is the dependent clause attached to an independent clause. Since I swam at the health club, I've had a runny nose since I swam at the health club. Okay, these sentences over here that have a dependent clause combined with an independent clause are what's called complex sentences. So a complex sentence is a sentence that has one or more dependent or subordinate clauses connected to a dependent clause. A sentence that has one or more dependent clause connected to an independent clause, that is a complex sentence. All right, so how do these work? Dependent clauses, guess what? They act as one part of speech. The whole clause works together to act like either an adverb, an adjective, or a noun. In this lesson, we're going to focus on dependent clauses that act as adverbs. Later on, we'll talk about the ones that act as adjectives and nouns, but this one is going to focus on dependent clauses that act like adverbs. So remember, adverbs modify mostly verbs, but also sometimes adjectives and other adverbs. This is how they work. Okay, look at this sentence. James ran yesterday. Ran when? Ran yesterday. You know that when is an adverb question, so yesterday is an adverb. James ran at noon. James ran when? At noon. Again, that is a prepositional phrase with at being the preposition and noon being the object of the preposition. It's answering an adverb question, so it is an adverbial prepositional phrase telling you when. At noon is telling you when. It is an adverbial prepositional phrase. Here is James ran before he ate breakfast. Before he ate breakfast is telling you when, right? Ran when? He ran before he ate breakfast. But this is a dependent clause because it has a subject, he, and a verb, ate. But if you just say before he ate breakfast, it wouldn't make sense by itself. But you know if you put it with an independent clause, James ran, then you know James ran before he ate breakfast, and before he ate breakfast is telling you when, okay? So it's an adverb clause telling you when. All right, and adverb clauses answer the adverb questions. So it's a really good idea to remember these questions. Adverbs answer the questions when, where, how, why, and to what extent. All right, this brings us to conjunctions. When we first started this presentation, I said, remember that when we learned conjunctions, conjunctions are words that connect two or more words, phrases, or clauses, okay? So you know that coordinating conjunctions connect two or more elements of the same type. So for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so are the coordinating conjunctions that will connect two nouns together, or two verbs together, or two phrases, or two independent clauses. You also know there are two other types of conjunctions, correlative and subordinating. We know that correlative conjunctions really just act just like coordinating conjunctions. They just have two parts, like either or, neither nor, not only but also, etc. So correlative conjunctions don't do anything different than coordinating. They just have more than one word. But can you guess what subordinating conjunctions do? So subordinating conjunctions, they introduce dependent adverb clauses. They connect the dependent adverb clause to the independent clause. And here is a list of subordinating conjunctions. After, although, as, because, before, even if, even though, if, in order that, once, provided that, rather than, since, so that, than, that, though, unless, until, when, whenever, where, whereas, wherever, whether, while, and why. These words are the words that make the dependent adverb clause dependent. So here you have independent clauses, right? Mark ate dinner at 6. The cat meowed, I swam at the health club. When you add the subordinating conjunction, that is what makes these over here now a dependent clause. When you add the word because to the independent clause, Mark ate dinner, it becomes dependent because of the addition of the subordinating conjunction. Okay? Can you see how these words, because, whenever, and since, have made these clauses into dependent clauses? When those words are added, these clauses can no longer stand alone, and they don't make sense as a complete thought by themselves. Now they need to be attached somehow to an independent clause in order to be a sentence. So here's your assignment. Okay, recognizing clauses and conjunctions. I'm gonna give you some sentences on the next slide. For each sentence, you're gonna identify the conjunction type and the conjunction. So is it coordinating or subordinating? You're gonna write if the sentence is compound or complex. If it's complex, you're gonna identify the dependent clause and the independent clause. Okay, this is how it works. So here's a sentence. I wanna go to the dance, but I have to get my homework done first. Now the question is what is the conjunction in that sentence, right? The conjunction is but. That is one of our fanboys conjunctions, so we know that's a coordinating conjunction, so this is a compound sentence. So our answer first is A, it's a coordinating conjunction, which is but. The second part of our answer is it's a compound sentence. It has two independent clauses and both clauses are equal. Because remember, coordinating conjunctions connect things that are the same. Sentence 2, she can go to the dance if she gets her homework done first. The conjunction is the word if, okay? So this is a subordinating conjunction because when you add it to this clause, it makes the clause dependent. It no longer makes sense on its own. And that makes this sentence, sentence 2, a complex sentence. Because remember, a complex sentence is a sentence that has at least one dependent clause attached to an independent clause. All right? And so if you have a complex sentence, you have to identify the parts. The independent clause in the sentence is, she can go to the dance. The dependent clause is, if she gets her homework done. So this is what your assignment will look like. You don't have to rewrite the sentence, but you're going to have, your answers will be 2A and 2B, or 3A and 3B, because you're going to do these two parts for each of the sentences. And the sentences are on the next slide. All right, here are your 6 sentences. We will be late for the movie if we don't leave right now. I want to go with you, but my mom won't let me. When we raise enough money, we will take the students on a cruise. I have to wash the dishes and you have to dry them. My mom likes cookie dough ice cream, so I brought some home for her. She won't let me go even if I get on my hands and knees and beg. So for each of these 6 sentences, you're going to tell A, what is the conjunction, and is the conjunction coordinating or subordinating? And then B, is it a complex sentence or a compound sentence? If it's a complex sentence, which one is the independent clause and which one is the dependent? Okay, please submit this in Schoology. Just hit the submit button, click create, type up your answers, and then hit the final submit button, and then it will get turned in to me.